What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season, and all the things that go with
it. Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's week 18, Sam.
18.
Mm-hmm. Last week of the season. It's the last full preview show of the year. The last 6-hour show, game by game, 16 games. This is it. Wrapping it up.
Yeah.
We have a whole bunch of backup quarterbacks this week, so might not get into it too much. But yeah, we're going to get into all the games here, week 18, the storylines and all the fun. Still don't. My body's saying playoffs.
Yeah. Well, you just don't acknowledge this week as a
I
thing.
don't. If your favorite player hasn't broken the record yet,
Didn't
for
count.
a counting stat, too late.
Mm-hmm.
Better luck next year. It's over. It's over. This week doesn't count.
Cut off.
And a lot of the NFL is basically agreeing. Lot of backup quarterbacks here, including a real interesting decision with the Rams, which we'll get into when we get there, because they have seating available. They have options to move up, and they decided they're still sitting Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, and the Rams have always been sort of at the forefront of this, sitting down players. I mean, the Sean McVay Rams. Remember, they were the first team that started to basically say nobody of any consequence is seeing the field in preseason. And now, well, actually, in that time, everybody started to copy that, and now it's actually starting to come back around the other direction again. But the point being, he was the first to be like, there is no value in this, and now apparently is willing to throw away playoff seeding even to stick with that.
And then before we get into it, just a quick reminder to the people where they can vote for the PFF NFL podcast as American Football Podcast of the Year. We got the link in the description, but we'd appreciate your vote. We're a finalist for Best American Football Podcast, at least in the top 10 here. Minimum top 10. But we want to be number one, and we want you guys to be number one because we're all in this together. So go vote if you can, preferably on your desktop.
Well, I mean, you can vote however you want. It's just that it might not even work in your desktop. That's the problem.
Anything else?
No, I mean, I've been out here on every radio hit I do. I'm shilling for votes. I'm like a politician over here, just trying to get your vote.
You got to remind me. I got Pittsburgh. I'm sure the Pittsburgh people, when I do radio later today, I'm sure we'll get a ton of voters to go from Pittsburgh radio.
Yeah, because they love you.
My Seattle radio hit. We got to get that going. All right, you ready to talk some football?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Pittsburgh, it's the first game of the weekend. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. It's 4:30 Saturday afternoon, and the Steelers are favored by 4 because Lamar Jackson sitting. It's going to be Tyler Huntley, Pro Bowler, starting in this game. And Steelers need the win to get into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. And this is a weird game because Baltimore, not only are they, they've decided they have not only just their decision come down to do they want to help Pittsburgh or not, right? Because obviously their part is locked up. But they are actually incentivized to lose this game for their own benefit because if you look at playoff odds, if you look at Super Bowl odds, all those kinds of things, right now the market says Buffalo is the second best team in the AFC, even though they might not even make the playoffs, right? The market says that Buffalo is the biggest threat to Baltimore within the conference, and Baltimore losing actually makes it more difficult for Buffalo to make the playoffs this week. So the only thing that Baltimore actually determines is like how much do we care about helping Pittsburgh or how much do we care about actually trying to make it more difficult for Buffalo. So theoretically, if you're playing the percentages and looking at like what is our edge here, our edge is obviously keeping everybody healthy. That's one part of it. But we're actually incentivized to lose because Buffalo is the team we want to face the least in the postseason.
On the other hand, if Pittsburgh loses and Buffalo wins, so Buffalo doesn't win the AFC East, Miami wins it, Buffalo has a real good chance to be the 6th seed and go into Kansas City. So through that lens, Baltimore, if they beat Pittsburgh, knock them out, you're assured of either the Bills or the Chiefs, who are probably the biggest challenges. I mean, Miami's up there too. Of course, they'd have the 2 seed. But two of the biggest challenges, Buffalo and Kansas City, would have to play each other in the first round. Mm-hmm. So there's that perspective as well. You could, if Pittsburgh wins, maybe Buffalo's out totally. But if Buffalo's in, they could end up playing Kansas City round 1. Pittsburgh scenarios here, they get in with the win. I'm reading all the scenarios. It's Scenario Thursday.
Great podcast.
It's my favorite podcast.
This is why we're nominated for awards.
This is actually, I'm not built for Week 18, but I'm built for the last week of the season. Whenever it is. Pittsburgh's in with a win plus a Buffalo loss, or a win plus a Jacksonville loss or a tie, or a Pittsburgh win plus a Houston-Indianapolis tie, or Pittsburgh tie. We got to stop with the ties. That's too much.
Yeah.
We won't do the other ties.
Great.
But it would be funny if Pittsburgh wins on Saturday and Houston and Indy, as if they tie, Pittsburgh gets in, regardless of what else happens.
Okay.
What else are we looking for in this game? I mean, the big story for the Steelers here is it's another Steelers-like season, pretty much for the third straight year. Everything in Pittsburgh feels not great. How are they winning these games? How are they pulling it off? Remember, we're 8-9 games into the season. They had not outgained their opponent.
Yeah.
And they were still 6-3.
They fired Matt Canada.
They fire Matt Canada.
First time since the Depression that they'd fired somebody.
And it seemed like there was life from the offense, but not points. There was life, but not points.
But only for like a week.
With Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett gets hurt. Mitch Trubisky comes in. He's terrible. And then Mason Rudolph comes in.
Saves the day.
In 2 straight weeks of 30-plus points in Pittsburgh. To the point now where, look, the offense does look different with Mason Rudolph. They're running the ball a lot better. They're running the ball often. And especially last week in Seattle, there were big plays down the field.
Yeah.
And again, against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, 86-yarder to George Pickens. There were some big plays from the pass game as well.
And it's been like all the way through the year with multiple different quarterbacks. Generally, the answer has been if you just start force-feeding George Pickens, good things will happen. Like he may have that, the lazy sort of tape where he just didn't bother blocking for Jaylen Warren and then tried to make out like that was normal. But he is their best playmaker. Like, by a distance. And if they just start feeding him the football all the way through the year, whether it's, slants to the house, whether it's a rare in-breaking route deeper down the field, whether it's down the field on the sideline, like whatever, just get the guy the ball because he's by far your best playmaker.
So my question is, so obviously Pittsburgh's playing for something. I do think Baltimore at the end of the day says rest is the best way to go. But as we always say, you can't literally rest every single starter. I mean, you do have a backup at every position.
Right.
But you only have, 8 to 10 offensive linemen healthy, active. You have to keep some of your starters in there. What can Baltimore even bring to the table here? As a team that, by the way, is very good in the preseason all the time. And I think that's in part because of their depth, because they're just fundamentally sound in their depth. But are we going to see defensively, I assume we're not going to see Kyle Hamilton battling his injuries. Are we going to see Roquan Smith in the middle of the defense, Justin Madubuike at defensive tackle? I don't know how much Baltimore is even going to put their starters out there, and then they have the 2 weeks off before their bye, before their next game.
I mean, given that, as I said, they're incentivized to lose. They've already kind of declared effectively that they're going to be resting people. I would imagine this will be as bare bones a team as you can make putting out there. Like nobody that's dealing with any kind of injury is going to play. Nobody that's in that's a serious consequence to the team's playoff hopes is going to play. It's going to be a preseason outing, I would imagine.
All right, the line right now is 3.5. You had it at 4 when you put the lines in, so it's 3.5, and Pittsburgh's favored. Anything else you want to add to this? You got T.J. Watt. The defense too. You've made the point. They've dealt with all these injuries. I think they're getting Minka back. I think they're getting some guys back here this week. But they've dealt with an overhaul in the secondary. But they've still rallied, and that has been the key for Mike Tomlin. A lot of people in Pittsburgh have wanted Mike Tomlin out this year, but he did it again, man. Coming off back-to-back losses to the Patriots and Cardinals, when it should have been rock bottom for this franchise this year. Big Ben's calling him out and the whole thing. Then they bounce back. They're like, sure, we're going to win the next 2 games. And a tough one in Seattle last week to keep their playoff hopes alive. So Steelers favored by 3.5 here. Where are you going?
I am going to go with Pittsburgh. I mean, they need the game. It matters to them. Doesn't matter to Baltimore. And I don't think Baltimore's backups are that good relative to Pittsburgh starters.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I'll also take the Steelers to cover. It is interesting. The line's moving a little bit, in the Ravens' favor here as we get closer. Don't know how much information Vegas has as to who's going to play for Baltimore. But like I said, you have to have some sprinkling of starters in there. I'm just not really sure how many. All right, before we get into the second Saturday game, as a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family. How to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan for even the pickiest eater, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life provides an easy one-stop shop for your family's financial needs, offering high-quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Saturday night. This is a fun one. AFC South. So if Pittsburgh wins, they're rooting for a tie on Saturday night. Houston Texans at the Indianapolis Colts. Texans favored by 1. Playoff spots on the line for both. They're both 9-7, right? 9-7. Texans and Colts. AFC South. They're all tied. They're tied with Jacksonville, and the AFC South is still out there for both teams, the Texans and the Colts. They would need the Jags to lose, though. The winner, so whichever team wins, is rooting for Jacksonville to lose.
Got it. This is going to be a terrible podcast.
It's going to be a great podcast as I stumble through.
There is simply no way
all the scenarios
that Gardner Minshew can be involved in a tie. He will not allow it to happen. Him individually will not allow that to happen. If it's down to the last play of the game, somebody will put up points. Whether it's his team or the opposition, there will be points on the final play of the game if it is down to the wire in overtime.
I like it. So no ties here.
No ties. It's not going to happen.
Minshew's played a lot cleaner the second half of the season after a crazy first half. But we've talked a lot about the Colts, their offensive line. They got Braden Smith back last week, and how he's playing through injury, but he's better than poor Blake Freeland.
He is.
Michael Pittman being back last week opens up that offense. There's been a bit of a revolving door at running back, and I think this is what speaks to the offensive line, is they've had success with Zach Moss running the ball, whether it's Jonathan Taylor back there. They've gotten a little life from Trey Sermon showing up here with a couple big plays over the last few weeks. So Indy's that team where I don't think you can put your finger on how it's all working, other than I think Shane Steichen's coaching really well, and they're making the pieces work there on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, both defensive lines have been really big parts of their success this year. Houston's, I think, is a little more obvious. Obviously, they traded for Will Anderson Jr., or not traded and then drafted. They brought in Derek Barnett. They've had some players that are producing and have been producing consistently all the way through the season. Anderson looks like a really good player for them, even as a rookie. And then Indianapolis, that defensive line, given they're one of those teams that does not like to blitz at all, like incredibly blitz reluctant. They rush 4. Those 4 need to win, and they have been winning pretty much through the year. And again, it's a collection of guys that you wouldn't say should have an amazing success rate. Guys like Samson Ebukam has become, a pretty good pass rusher for them, just as an individual rushing 4. So both those defensive lines, I think, have been really impressive this year. I think Houston has a bit more everywhere else. And I think, obviously, they have the better quarterback in C.J. Stroud, even though he's just a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, Houston, look, I don't know if I'm overrating Houston versus Indy. They're both 9-7. I think a part of the 9-7 record, though, C.J. Stroud missing back-to-back weeks hurt. They lost one of those games. Houston feels like the team if they get into the playoffs because of Stroud, what he's done in crunch time, even though he's a rookie, right? I expect him to play similar ball in the playoffs, even though it'd be his first time doing that. the way Stroud has led some of those fourth quarter comebacks and the way D'Amico Ryan's defense, the way that defense has started to kind of take on that personality, all the defensive line additions that you've mentioned and how they've played, Derek Stingley stepping up in his second year at corner. Texans have some intriguing pieces to go into a Kansas City and maybe pull an upset or whatever it might be. Scenario-wise, Houston, as I mentioned, both teams win the AFC South if they win and Jacksonville loses. And then Houston can still get into the playoffs if they win and there's other stuff. But they got to win. It's win and you're probably in for both teams here. Mm-hmm. Win and Houston win and you're in, and Colts win and they need some help.
Yep, I'm going with the Texans. I think that they are a better football team when C.J. Stroud is there, even though they don't have Tank Dell like they did earlier in the season. I just think they have more to that team.
Going right to the picks, huh?
Yeah.
Nothing else to add?
No.
Good. I'll also take Houston.
It's Week 18. We got to fire through this.
It's Week 18. We're going fast. But these are the big games. These are the games that matter the most. Do we have a Discord game of the week?
Ooh, it's a good question. Let me check.
I got to go check that out. We'll start getting into some of the Sunday games. We're both taking the Texans here Saturday night. I'm looking forward to that game. A couple island games there. All right, Sunday, here's what they've done. They've split up the schedule. We got 6 1 o'clocks and 7 4:25 starts. That's how the NFL's been doing Week 18.
Madness.
What is it?
Madness. Bears-Packers is the Discord game of the week.
Let's get to that then. It's one of the 4:25 games, and we've got the Packers favored by 3. Of course, the Bears are officially eliminated from the playoffs at 7-9. But the Bears are 7-9, man. They're back now. They're in a bit of a roll. So you have Justin Fields coming off of one of his best games. Jordan Love continues to play extremely well, one of our highest graded quarterbacks over the last 6 or 7 weeks. Coming off a great game again last week on Sunday Night Football. Packers playing for their playoff lives here. What are you looking for in this?
I mean, totally different game. This is one of the rare ones where, like so many times now, these division games are stacked at the back end of the season, so these teams all play each other like twice in 3 weeks or whatever. And you're like, well, we kind of saw this a couple of weeks ago. What's different this time? This game was week 1, so it's week 1 and week 18. In this division split, the teams could not be more different than they were the last time they met. I mean, you've got Green Bay. Jordan Love's coming off this incredible performance where we talked about how he has the tendency every now and again to catch fire, kind of like the NBA Jam thing, where he just hits the run and then
he's on fire.
Then he can't miss. So he had one of those games. The Packers defense, like Joe Barry's defense, was amazing against Minnesota, and that off the back of several games in which his defense had been catastrophic, and we were saying, 5 different quarterbacks or whatever have had their best game this year against that defense. So can he do that twice, or was that just one game with his back up against the wall against the Vikings, who were starting a rookie quarterback? Can he do that against Justin Fields? And then Chicago, everything is better right now. I mean, yeah, it's been sort of since Fields came back from injury, but remember what he was like before he got injured, which was to say bad. I mean, earlier in the year, there were games where he had wide open receivers, and not only was he sort of missing them, he wasn't even seeing it. Either he couldn't pull the trigger when he'd seen it, or simply wasn't seeing it at all. I mean, he looked lost. The injury, in a weird way, might have actually been the best thing that could have happened to him because he got to sit down and reset. But since coming back, Fields has taken a huge step forward, not just, the running aspect, but as a passing, processing, pocket quarterback. I mean, he's doing things now that he simply wasn't doing earlier in the year before he got hurt. And that makes everything about Chicago a different prospect.
That was one of the curious things of this season. Why we were having that same conversation last year. He was a dynamic runner down the stretch, better as a passer, still more room to improve, and then it felt like they regressed. Fields regressed the first 3 weeks until he ran into the Broncos defense that was horrendous the first 6-7 weeks of the season. Fields, it is at the point where Bears fans are talking about keeping Fields and going through all those scenarios. If you keep him and you trade down again and you get this haul and you pair him with Marvin Harrison Jr. and another receiver or whatever it might be, that people are intrigued.
And he's got one more game to just make it even more, awkward for everybody. If he has another good performance, it's just one more game where it's like, man, Fields might be the guy.
So Brad Spielberg, who's on this show at least once a week here, Bears guy, pretty good job having a pulse of Bears Nation, so to speak. And he was tweeting yesterday about how he's impressed by Fields' improvement. There is probably this in-house decision where it's like, man, what do we do with this late season surge? Where people like the locker room loves Fields. They love what he's doing. What do we do with that when we know we've got this opportunity, I'm not going to use the word generational, but not every year do you have two guys going into the season you think are locked in as 1 and 2 overall QB who are probably going to end up there, and they look like really good NFL prospects, and Caleb Williams and Drake May. And oh, by the way, Michael Penix is balling out, and he's 24, but man, if he goes and beats Michigan next Monday night, they're going to be talking about Penix going in the top 10. There's going to be talk about Bo Nix going in the top 15. There's a lot of QBs to choose from here.
Well, also, the one thing you probably do know about Justin Fields at this point is even if he's not the guy, like let's say you decide to keep him around, he's earned one more year, right, before we have to pay him big money. We'll figure it out. We're going to go with him this year, and then if it all goes to hell, we can still move in a different direction. The one thing you probably do know about him is that he's good enough that you're not going to be picking number 1 overall again. Like that, and you wouldn't be this year if it was just down to Justin Fields. So it is that this conversation is difficult because it's like a 3-pronged thing. You have to ask, number 1, is Justin Fields better in isolation than Caleb Williams or Drake May? Number 2, is he going to be worth getting paid $45 million a year, which is what you're going to be staring down the barrel of if you think he is the guy? And then number 3, if you give him a shot instead of hedge, try and play the middle game and just keep him short term, you're not going to have this shot again. You're going to need another backup plan for quarterback because you're not going to have the number 1 overall pick again. Now, if that hedge involves trading down from number 1 and getting a giant draft haul, and maybe you have the capital next year to get up there again, but it's not as simple as it is this year where you have the choice now.
And so the point I wanted to add on where the conflict might be in the building in Chicago, it's feeling good down the stretch. Fields just had that nice game. It's the snow, and vibes are high, right? Feeling good in Chicago. What if he goes into Lambeau, right? The place where Aaron Rodgers, he owned you, and then he passed off ownership to Jordan Love, and where does the narrative aspect come in? This feels like a big fun game for the Bears. Not only can they knock the Packers out of the playoff picture, as the Lions did last year in Lambeau, the Bears can do that. And what did the Lions do off the back of that? Well, they carried that momentum into next year, got better, and now look at them winning the division. So the Bears feel like they have a lot to play for here. And we don't have to talk about them worried about draft position because they're locked in at 1. And who cares if they're picking 10 versus 12 versus 14? Hey, you got 1. It might not matter as much what that second pick is. So it's an interesting spot for the Bears, and especially if Fields and the Bears go into Lambeau, win the game from a decision perspective. For Green Bay, win and you're in. And, again, the big question for me is the defense. Can they do just enough? Because I am so impressed with Jordan Love. I'm so impressed with their offense and what Matt LaFleur has done, the way Love has turned his season around and developed, and just the confidence that he's playing with, man. It really felt like a switch flipped from a confidence perspective, and that's why Chris was highlighting all the jump throws and the off-balance throws. Like, Love is feeling it, and he's trusting his arm, and he's putting the ball in spots that he wasn't even close to hitting earlier in the season.
Yeah, Love has been fantastic. The defense, though, I don't think it's a question anymore about can they do just enough. I mean, we saw last week what that defense is capable of if they call a correct game. Like if they get more aggressive, if they blitz a little bit more, if they send slot corners at the quarterback instead of just sitting back in soft zones or off-man coverage. I mean, that's the thing. We just saw, okay, it was against a rookie, but Nick Mullins came in and was still equally as lost. Like he moved the ball a bit, but he was still under pressure all the time. The defense still did a really good job. So I think the bar has been raised. Like people have been complaining about that defense all season long, not because it stinks, but because it should be better than it's been. And we saw earlier in the year it was better, and then in that game it was better. They are capable of much more than they have shown for a lot of the season. So I think that is the standard. Can they repeat what they did against Minnesota, against a much more difficult opponent to prepare for because of Justin Fields? And then, yeah, I think it's two teams potentially riding this wave of a surge of improvement. the Bears and Justin Fields and that defense, Tyreek Stevenson has had one of the best grades of any corner in the last few weeks. They've got some really good performances on the defensive side. And then for Green Bay, Jordan Love has been amazing recently, but also all of those young receivers are playing well. And they've been without some of the, if you were looking on paper, you would say arguably their top 2 targets are Christian Watson and Luke Musgrave, and neither one of them has been playing in the last couple of weeks. Instead, it's been Tucker Kraft. Bo Melton was the first 100-yard receiver they had. But all of these guys are playing well and improving. So if they're able to actually make it and hit the playoffs with Jordan Love playing as well as he is right now, if he catches a good run, and all of these young receivers that are like pieces for the future all developing and getting better, I mean, it could be a huge moment for that Green Bay team.
All I know is this offseason, we are going to be hyping up the NFC North because I love the way the Packers are trending, Bears are trending in a good direction. We know what the Lions have become, and the Vikings are still a solid team that have, dealt with 4 different quarterbacks this year, lost their starter. So the NFC North looks like they're trending up. We got the Packers favored by 3, playoff lives on the line for the second straight year. Where are you going with this one?
Going with the Bears. I think they are a different proposition now than they were earlier in the year.
Wow. I'm also taking the Bears. Mm-hmm. I think the Packers win by 2, though.
Yeah.
Packers get into the playoffs, game-winning field goal to win it, but not cover the spread.
I could see it.
How's that?
Yep.
Packers by 2 in this game. All right, let's go through the 1 o'clocks here. We'll go Tampa Bay Bucks at the Carolina Panthers. Bucks favored by 4.5. The Bucks, going into last week, if they had beaten the Saints, they would have won the NFC South. But their playoff odds were extremely high, despite playing a tough game against the Saints, because of this game, because the Bucks could still win this game. So win and they win the NFC South. If they lose though, and the Saints win, Saints get in as NFC South champions. Bucks favored by 4.5 here at Carolina.
Yeah, the Bucks essentially had 2 shots at a win in game, and this is the second of them.
Well said, yeah.
And it's against Carolina.
Pretty concise.
Now the only downside is Baker Mayfield is banged up. He's not practicing right now. I think he'll play.
He got hurt right at the end of the game against the Saints. And what is it exactly?
His
it looked like his left shoulder,
yeah.
and it looked like the shoulder that he hurt a couple weeks ago, or a couple years ago. The Bucks offense though, so they've been cooking, right? So, but before last week, they had a stretch of scoring 29 points against the Falcons, 34 against the Packers, 30 against the Jags. The last time they were held in check a little bit was against the Panthers. It was 21-18 in Tampa Bay, and the Panthers played them tough in Tampa. There was some rain, there was a rain interception from Baker. I think it slipped completely out of his hand, but it was 21-18 just in early December, where the Panthers did hang tough, and it was right around the point I thought, that you were expecting maybe the Panthers are going to turn things around a little bit, show some life from Bryce Young. They still haven't, even though Bryce Young had back-to-back really good games, the whole offense regressed again last week against Jacksonville. So can Carolina make things interesting here in the NFC South and at least give Tampa Bay a game, who had been trending awesome for a few weeks until they ran into the Saints that first 3 quarters last week?
So it's officially a rib injury for Baker Mayfield. Either way, it's one that it's not going to keep him out of the game, I think, and it would probably need to for Carolina to have much of a shot in this game. Look, Carolina showed 1 or 2 times this season they've shown signs of life against anybody. I don't see much of a reason why it would happen this week against Tampa Bay. The Bucs are a flawed team, but they've been pretty good on either side of the ball. I just don't. Bryce Young's going to get overwhelmed again, and they're not going to get much going.
Bucs have been dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. They should get Shaq Barrett back. It looks like they've been dealing with a revolving door cornerback. I think they should be healthy with Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean out there. So Tampa may be getting healthy at the other spots besides Baker Mayfield. They do have a better overall team. The defense is solid. I think it's going to be a challenge for Tampa Bay for Carolina moving the ball on this one again. 39 degrees with broken clouds here.
Broken clouds, huh?
This week. I'm trying to see if there's any rain games. There's rumors of snow in the Northeast. We might get some snow games potentially.
Might get snow here. It's supposed to be snow everywhere this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Snow here, huh?
Uh-huh.
You okay with? Oh, you don't have your car anyway, so it's good.
Yeah, not until later. Look, sometimes your mechanic tries to kill you. It happens.
Last thing here. Mike Evans has been having just an outstanding season for the Bucs, and I think storyline for me this year was Mike Evans. Not an okay performance from Chris Godwin, but it was the third, fourth, and fifth options for Tampa in the pass game had been non-existent. But now Mike Evans is still awesome, and they're spreading the ball around.
You don't watch the shows that you don't appear on because you don't support your own podcast. But
I'm usually in meetings.
Whatever.
Like yesterday, I had to miss the show because I was in a very intense meeting.
Anyway, yesterday we had a conversation with Trev, a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Had questions that come in either end of the spectrum. So you have to choose. You, who is so keen on the fence, cannot straddle the fence on this one. Is Mike Evans either a Hall of Famer or wide receiver Frank Gore?
Hall of Famer.
Ooh. I said, what if Mike Evans is in fact wide receiver Curtis Martin?
Yeah, that's a better one, I think. Because Gore had a whole bunch of average seasons at the end. I think Mike Evans has always been an above average, very good receiver. But I think, what would be like the highest yearly ranking you would put Mike Evans in?
Well, this is the thing. So
the highest yearly ranking is probably 7th or 8th, you would say?
This year is probably, and not for sure, going to be the first season in which he leads the NFL in any statistical category. He has 13 touchdowns right now, which is one more.
He didn't win in touchdowns 2 years ago?
Nope.
In 21?
Never done it. Never done it in touchdowns, catches, or yards.
He's got 13 touchdown catches, number 1.
Which ironically is less than he's had in previous years, but this year is leading the league.
What did he have in 21 for passes? Oh, was it Cooper Kupp that year? 2021 touchdown passes. Yeah, Kupp had 16, Evans had 14.
Yeah, never led the league.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there you go. Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Hall of Fame.
2 people.
Good answer. He's been very, very good. Very good, very consistent. That's been his thing. Over 15 yards per catch in his career, too.
Yeah.
It's impressive. Anyway, let's make some picks.
Tampa Bay.
Bucks by 4.5. Yeah, I'll also take the Bucks. Going to the playoffs and perhaps playing
Playoff Baker. Again.
Next week, which I might have to miss the preview show, but next week we'll be talking about the Bucks maybe taking on the Eagles and how the Eagles defense has been a train wreck right now, and Tampa Bay can pull that upset at home as NFC South champions. All right, we've got other games to talk about here. Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. Jeff Driscoll's getting the start here for the Browns.
Go.
I got no more use for this game.
Poor Jeff Driscoll.
Some games we're not going to talk about, right? Bengals favored by 7. Browns are locked into the 5 seed.
Yeah.
Bengals are out of the playoffs.
They are.
Your pick?
That's it? That's your analysis of this game?
Well, I'm going to go search for our prize picks lineup so I can talk about that in a second here, but I got nothing else.
You got nothing else?
It's week 18. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, look.
The 5th starting quarterback for the Browns this year.
Yeah. Joe Flacco gets a week off. Rest the old geriatric body. Make sure he's in tip-top condition for the playoff run, the Super Bowl run.
Yeah, going to need that.
Going to do it again. This time he needs a break before that happens. Good for him. Good for Joe. He rested the body. He'd had a year on the couch or whatever, more or less. Comes back in, gets the Browns to the playoffs, gets them in contention, and then, he's going to need a break before the Super Bowl run.
Yeah. He's earned his rest. Doesn't need the reps.
No, God, no. Good for Joe.
Bengals by 7. Browns presumably resting other people.
Yeah.
So what does Cleveland have ahead of them as the 5 seed? They're going to be playing the AFC South champion. It'll most likely be the Jaguars in Jacksonville, of course. Or it also could be the Texans or the Colts. They've beaten all of them? They may have beaten all those teams already this year.
The Browns are a fascinating team. I know I said that earlier that Buffalo was the second favorite for the AFC, but nobody wants to play the Browns.
Yeah, they beat all 3 of those teams.
Yeah, nobody wants to play this Cleveland team. They have the best defense in the NFL. They have all season long. Myles Garrett is a Defensive Player of the Year level individual, and he's not the only guy up front anymore. And Joe Flacco is capable of having an amazing game. And that alone makes them terrifying because if he has one of those games, given the defense that he's paired with, they're almost impossible to beat. If he doesn't have one of those games, they're still difficult to beat because the defense is so good.
Yeah, if the Browns win, if they do win in round 1, they would most likely play Baltimore coming off their bye, unless there is an upset with one of the 6 or 7 seeds. All of that stuff's possible. But that's pretty much all to talk about here. Eli, you got anything on the Bengals here? We got a who day from Eli. Perhaps rooting for the loss for a little bit better draft position. Can you get Malik Neighbors in there? Can you get Roma Dunze? Can you get close enough to get one of those top receivers?
I mean, the Bengals, they're going to be a fascinating offseason team. They have a lot of big decisions looming.
All right, who are you picking in this one?
7.
This is like picking week 4 preseason games.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because it's not, you think Jake Browning, 7 points, Browns defense. It's not going to be the Browns defense. It's going to be the Browns backup defense. And that's probably not as good as the starting defense. It's probably not an all-time historical run.
Throw them out.
I'm going to go with Cleveland keeping it within 7.
I'll take Cincinnati. Do we have snow? What do we have? What's the weather on this thing? That could affect things.
Could affect it.
Where's Green Line?
Here we go.
What's our weather?
Overcast clouds. That's all it's got.
I feel like Green Line only reports cloud levels.
That's
no
all
snow.
we get. We don't get precipitation, just a cloud cover.
Apparently, I don't see any game with precipitation over on Green Line.
Maybe it's Sunday that it's hitting. No, Saturday. Maybe it's the other day of the weekend.
It could be. All right, let's tell you about our Prize Picks lineup for this week. Speaking of Eli, I think he put this one together again. So the key here with your Prize Picks lineup, guys that are playing for something. So we get Jonathan Taylor Saturday night going more than 80.5 rushing yards. We have Cowboys receiver CeeDee Lamb going more than 99.5 receiving yards. Taylor was rush yards. I don't know if I said that wrong, but 80.5 rush yards for Jonathan Taylor, more. CeeDee Lamb, more than 99.5 receiving yards. Josh Allen, more than 285.5 pass plus rush yards. We're combining those on Sunday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins. That's our Prize Picks lineup for this week, and you guys can all do the same over at Prize Picks. I didn't get the read yet. It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers, just like we just showed here. You pick more, you pick less. It's that easy. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or you pick less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, you can do that. You just find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to do entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community every week. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So what you're going to do is go to prizepicks.com/PFFNFL, use the code PFFNFL, and you get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/PFFNFL, use the code PFFNFL, first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy over at Prize Picks. Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions. Lions favored by 3.5 here. Nick Mullins back for the Vikings getting the start. Are the Lions still technically in play for number 2, or are they locked into 3 here, seeding-wise?
I think either way, Detroit is motivated in this game, given what happened last week. And I think that actually gives the Lions a rare opportunity to create that galvanized siege mentality thing that actually has an impact going into the postseason. I mean, Detroit may have been motivated anyway, but this is a different type of motivation. The NFL, not only did they screw them out of that Dallas game. Now, look, they also screwed Dallas like a drive before, so that part is kind of irrelevant. But from Detroit's perspective, they got screwed out of that game, which screwed them out of playoff seeding, and everything that's happened subsequently, the NFL has basically just put, flip the bird to Detroit and said, "You're liars. There's nothing you can do about it. We're not gonna fix it. In fact, we're gonna make it seem like it was your fault. We're gonna blame you for it all, and we're gonna make like TV shows out of it. There's a mic'd up segment that shows all this thing. We're gonna essentially mock you about the whole thing." If I was part of the Lions setup, I would be furious about how everything is played out about that game. And I think they can actually channel that into some kind of postseason, motivation. And legitimately, it sounds ridiculous, but those those siege mentality things, if you're able to actually create them, they work. Like, there is a reason that NFL coaches, or coaches everywhere, forget NFL, all sports, keep trying to tap into that stuff because players are slightly unhinged, and if you're able to convince them that the world is out to screw them, it makes them play harder. So I think that whole week, that whole disaster with the officiating is actually going to get a pissed off Detroit Lions team, not just playing hard in this game, but playing hard in this game on their way into the playoffs.
I don't understand how bulletin board material type stuff actually does work, but I do know they're all looking for it.
Yep.
They're all looking for it.
And maybe it only works beyond a certain level. Like, some guy says something about your team, that's pretty hard to register these days. But the NFL officials actively screwing you out of a game and then effectively blaming you for it, which is what's happened here, I think that's pretty easy to rally behind.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the 2005 Worcester Tornadoes.
Of course.
We were, I mentioned playing the Quebec Capitales.
You did.
We played them in the finals. They kept trading for the best players around the league.
Yeah.
We kept the same squad together.
And that really motivated
we
you?
We rallied around our team. We made 4 transactions all year. That was it. And they were all deserved.
So it was you against the big spenders.
It was us against the big spenders. We rallied.
Just an underdog story.
As a squad. So I can relate.
Of course.
To these NFL underdogs heading into the playoffs. I think the Lions should start the game with like a 9 offensive lineman formation with 4 eligibles.
Every single play, they should send 3 tackles. They should do exactly the same thing as they did in this game, every play, and effectively quiz the ref about which one reported as eligible.
That would be great. Really, that'd be a great response. I wonder if they would do that.
Troll them actively.
Dan Campbell was on Detroit radio this week. He is great. He is as I feel like we anticipated a bit of crazy and intense with him initially, but in the wrong ways, right? We thought it would be like he's gonna like
classic meathead idiot.
Right. We thought he was gonna like run the ball, 38
I think that's
straight times.
Once he gave the kneecap biting speech, that's like what everybody defaulted to, right?
He's
Classic dinosaur.
He's gonna punt, play defense, but it's not. It's like the radio host was like it was probably it was like a low percentage decision to go for 2 from the 7. He goes, tell me what you really believe. He's like, I think it was a stupid decision. He's like, but he's like asking for these answers. He's aggressive. And I wonder if he's going to handle this one aggressively. The other aspect of this, again, there's the storylines this week, I think, are which teams are resting, which teams are playing. And it is a fascinating decision every week. Keeping guys sharp, getting reps versus being healthy. And again, we'll talk about the Rams later, but the Rams could go from between the 6 and the 7 seed. They could dictate if they go to Detroit. Like right now they're locked in to go to Detroit. But they could have to go to Dallas where they got waxed, the Rams. And they're deciding health is the most important thing. The Lions last year in week 18 had nothing to play for because Seattle won in their game. Detroit knew they had nothing to play for except play spoiler against the Packers, and they played it like it was a playoff game. Now the Lions know they have nothing to play for as far as seeding goes. And is that just the Dan Campbell mentality? We're going to play it like it's a real game.
Well, I also think a lot of times, one of the reasons you might play starters is if you are riding, like you don't want to lose the momentum, whatever that's worth, or if it even exists, right, during the course of the season. So if you're a team that's hot right now, heading into the playoffs, but with this 1 week to go before you make it, I think there are some coaches there that don't want to risk losing that by resting everybody and maybe screwing up a game or simply just having a week off for those starters and those guys going off the boil. Again, because of what we just talked about, like the Lions are now in this zone where they are pissed off and they want to do something about it. The first thing up to do about it is this game. So I don't think that they will risk losing that, like not capitalizing on that potential boost of the siege mentality and the league against us and all that kind of stuff by throwing out backups, losing a game or just simply not capturing that intensity. I think they want to make a point. They want to win this game easily, rest everybody in the fourth quarter or whatever, and then do it again next week.
Lions favored by 3.5 here. Vikings are putting Nick Mullins back in, who, again, what we've seen from him is the ability to move the ball, get the ball to their good group of playmakers, and then turn it over a bunch. Which is the best Vikings quarterback play we've seen over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, it is. And that's the bottom line, I guess. It might be my favorite description that Chris has ever had of anybody during that broadcast where he was talking about Nick Mullins. And he's like, I love watching Nick Mullins play. He'll move the ball, blah, blah. He's crazy, but he'll at least put some yards up. You're like, that's perfect. That's exactly what he is. He is nuts. Like, he will put passes in the air that are ridiculous. But he will move the ball between doing that, which you can't say about Jaron Hall and you can't say about Josh Dobbs necessarily. So, to me, the decision would be between Dobbs or Mullins. And I guess if you're Kevin O'Connell, you think there's a higher chance that the guy that moves the ball can maybe not turn it over a bunch of times than there is of the guy who won't turn it over that much moving the ball when he's struggling.
The interesting thing when I'm watching quarterbacks without what I would say is below average NFL arm strength. Average is this relative term. I've said this before, like in baseball, they said in the scouting scale, your average fastball back when I was playing was like 90, 91 miles an hour. But like 85% of pitchers threw above that. So it's like average doesn't mean the average of every pitcher. It's just like, this is what we consider average at the major league level, right? Like serviceable average, I guess. I feel like NFL arm strength is like that. 28 out of 32 starting quarterbacks at any given time are above average NFL arm strength. But every now and again, you have a below average arm. Like, that's Mullins, right? Below average arm. That's what Kellen Moore had. And you have to...
Well, Mullins kind of feels like what would happen if Brett Favre had no arm. Like Brett Favre, who's defining...
Jake Browning has a below average arm, but when you have to play with above average
anticipation
and accuracy.
He's like a classic gunslinger, except he doesn't have the gun to sling. He's just out here throwing the ball into ridiculous windows that can't possibly be complete because you don't have the arm to get it there.
And maybe average is the wrong word, but let's say like NFL baseline arm. Most NFL quarterbacks have the NFL baseline arm, whatever that is. And every now and again, you have guys that are below that, and they're fascinating to watch because Mullins was throwing passes like, how did it get there a couple times? And then other times, well, it doesn't get there, So it's like that's what makes it look crazy when it's Nick Mullins. Sees the same window as everyone else, but doesn't have the juice to get it there.
Yeah.
So where are you going? Detroit favored by 3.5.
Oh, Lions all day, baby.
Yeah, I'll take the Lions.
I'm riding that mystique. Dan Campbell, siege mentality.
Number 3 seed is locked in. I forgot to do a game of the week, which the game of the week is obviously Bills Dolphins on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that in the middle of the show here, or do you want to just save it for the end?
Save it for the end. We're
save it for the
going
end.
that way anyway.
We'll build up to the game of the week.
Yeah, that way everyone will stay around longer.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
YouTube likes that, I think.
People stick around.
Yeah.
You got to stick around for Bills Dolphins.
There's lots of things you're supposed to be doing.
We'll get to it in another hour.
Yeah, there's lots of things you're supposed to be doing to like maximize, the YouTube algorithm and stuff. I don't think we do any of it.
We need more professional teases.
Yeah, well, that I think
coming up soon.
That
Cowboys,
bell,
Commanders, Bills, Dolphins.
Yeah, that bell button is supposed to be very important. I don't think we've asked people to click that like twice ever.
Oh yeah, all the best YouTubers tell people to click the bell.
Right.
That will remind you when we're live and everything. Yeah, click the bell. Click the bell while you're here. Just do the bell. New York Jets at the New England Patriots. Patriots favored by 1.5. This game is supposed to have snow.
Yeah.
We do have snow.
In Green Line.
In Foxborough. Potentially the last game for Bill Belichick as head coach of the New England Patriots. I mean, that's the story here. We're probably not going to get into the X's and O's here of this.
We did our whole thing on cloud cover and the 1/8 versus 8/8 thing. Snow is just a blanket description. We don't have a volume of snow. Like, are we a dusting or
flakes are going to fall?
Are we a dusting or are we a blizzard here?
I don't know.
Right. I feel like that's an important variable.
I know we don't. Because
it was snowing in Chicago last week and that didn't do anything. That's
flurries. It's flurries.
Okay.
It was non-stick.
Non-sticky
snow.
Non-stick. So it's Chicago snow like last week. Yeah. In which case that's kind of irrelevant.
Cincinnati's a lot of non-stick snow. It doesn't stick.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of snow.
Now New England, it'll stick normally.
Yeah.
Let's see what we get. Late night snow tomorrow night coming here.
See, I told you it's earlier than the
weather.com. So Belichick, this could be the end for him. Our old friend Doug Kyde now works for the Boston Herald. He had an article.
Cousin
Doug, my cousin. Yeah, that's my wife's stepmom's cousin's daughter's husband. And he wrote an article, co-wrote an article today. He had multiple sources within New England talking about the dysfunction this season. about how Bill O'Brien only got to hire one of his coaches and maybe didn't have the full control, and just a lot of stuff going on. Adrian Clem, offensive line coach, maybe not a good fit, probably not coming back. How it all fell apart.
Yeah.
And there was some finger pointing in the office.
Gotta have it.
There is, because we're PFF and work with every single NFL team, we do kind of get some of that inside information. Some of the stuff that happens in NFL front offices is the personnel people and the coaching staff point fingers. The personnel staff says, I got you good players. The coaching staff says, no, you got us bad players. And they get mad at each other. In New England, even though Bill Belichick is the de facto GM, is it Mike Groh, I believe, is making a lot of the personnel decisions as well. And apparently, according to cousin Doug's story, there was some finger pointing, particularly on the offensive line, where they brought in guys like Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson and Connor McDermott to solve a tackle issue that never got solved. So all that to be said, this could be the end for Belichick in New England, a long legendary run. And a snow game, I think, would be a fitting way to go out.
Snow game. I don't want to see Trevor Siemian play in the snow. I don't want to see
Zappi, to be honest.
Oh, or that. I don't want to see either of these quarterbacks play in a heavy snow game. I just don't. And I love snow games. I think snow games are fantastic, but I don't want to see either of these quarterbacks play in the snow. I think that would go even worse than their usual game goes, which is not good. Zach Wilson still dealing with a concussion. His season is pretty much over. His time with the Jets is pretty much over, you would assume. It's Trevor Siemian time. It's two good defenses against two pretty terrible offenses. The end.
We'll talk about the legacy stuff. We'll talk about the decisions later. Because Monday morning's always rough. Like, you got to talk about the playoffs.
Black Monday.
Yeah, Black Monday.
Up to 8 coaches.
But I don't know that Belichick and Kraft are probably going to take some time. To talk.
Well, again, because he's under contract and they can probably trade him, even if they are. Like, they're not firing Bill Belichick on Monday, regardless of how this game goes.
I agree. And Bill Belichick, of course, because his future is in doubt, doesn't care probably about the Patriots picking number 2 versus number 4.
Right.
But they are in this world where the Patriots, Commanders, and Cardinals, depending on 4 or 5 different games this week, all could have the number 2 pick, whether they win or lose, and whether other teams win or lose. Patriots having to debate between potentially having a shot at Caleb Williams or Drake May, or beating the Jets. You know, that's not always a fun decision if you're New England, because they've beaten the Jets 15 straight times. We got a full circle moment here for Belichick.
And it's the 1 p.m., so they're not going to have the benefit of knowing, you know, what happened in the other games, whether they've already see, you know, they have to do this blind effectively.
So that's it for this game. It's more of a storyline. Is this the last time you see Belichick? Of course, the Jets, disappointing season, and they got to regroup around Aaron Rodgers this offseason. Patriots favored by 1.5 here in a potential snow storm.
Patriots for no good reason.
I will also take the Patriots because they've beaten the Jets a lot recently.
That's one good reason, I suppose.
Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints. Saints favored by 3. Of course, so this is all happening in the 1 o'clock hour. So the NFL does this for competitive purposes more than entertainment purposes. They stack all the games. I think that was my take last year, right? It's only for competitive, not for entertainment. They want to make sure that the teams are, you know, unaware of the games that they're depending on.
At least until there's a TV contractual obligation involved, and then you can have one game at the end where everybody knows already.
I mean, Bills Dolphins is perfect. You know that they're playing for something. It's the best game of the week already. Throw it on Sunday night. Saints favored by 3 here, but they need the Bucs to lose against the Panthers at the same time right now.
Yeah. Arthur Smith probably still coaching for his job. There's been reports recently that they're going to keep him around and going to stick with him, much to the dismay of fantasy owners everywhere. But a good performance in this game, of all games, I think would go a pretty long way to trying to secure him that job going forward. I mean, you can still make a fairly compelling case that everything is actually okay there, but the quarterback. And if he had a half decent quarterback, what would this offense look like? Sure, it would still be frustrating people because it almost certainly wouldn't be exclusively running through Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson the way everybody wants it to, but it would be pretty good. Like if they just had any sort of viable quarterback play instead of Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke. So if you're Arthur Blank, I think you can talk yourself into that fairly convincingly if, anything other than a complete beatdown in this game happens.
I kind of agree with that. I mean, I think it happens more at the college level that really frustrates me. College fans are so impatient. You know, a guy has 1 or 2 bad seasons, and they're like, get rid of him. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's about to play for the national title, and Michigan fans were ready to move on from him. There is something to sticking it out. I don't think NFL fans are as impatient when it comes to that because the coach doesn't have personnel control, so you can actually make this argument. Right? Like if Arthur Smith in college, you're the recruiter, you're the
if
you
don't have a quarterback, it's your fault.
It's your fault, right? So you can actually make this argument. And again, we poke fun and make joke about Arthur Smith and some of his comments and who he targets in the red zone and all that.
I mean, I think there's valid criticism there.
There is, but you could also paint a picture that he's done pretty well with what he's been given.
Like I think he does try and outsmart everybody too much. Like he overthinks it and tries to run the offense through guys that it shouldn't be running through. But having said that, even with that as a flaw, it's still been reasonably successful without a viable quarterback. So there's only so much you should be looking to boot him out the door. Like, will it be a thing that keeps him out of a Super Bowl even if he gets a quarterback? Maybe. But I don't think you can definitively say that now because the level of the quarterback play has been so bad.
From a Saints perspective, huge win last week against Tampa Bay. And for the 900th time this year, I'm going to say, how do you bottle up how they played? They weren't great in the fourth quarter, almost blew it. But how do you bottle up, if you're the Saints, how do you bottle that up and play another playoff caliber game, which is what they did against the Bucs with their season on the line? They went out and played high-level defense, physical, tough, like we have seen off and on through the last 5 or 6 years in New Orleans. And how do you do that again in Atlanta? Season's on the line here. New Orleans needs a win plus a Tampa Bay loss to win the South. They could also get into the playoffs, though, if they win and Seattle loses to Arizona. But you certainly don't want to have to rely on that. Either way, you got to take care of business first and foremost. I still think the Saints sitting on all that potential all year. Carr is a fine enough quarterback. They've added Taysom Hill into the equation. I mean, it should be a difficult offense to defend with their pass catchers, with Taysom Hill, with Juwan Johnson working in the middle of the field like he did last week. And then if they could play good, tough defense, take care of business here, there's a chance the Saints are hosting a playoff game next week, most likely against the Eagles. If everything falls into place.
Yeah, ineffectively exactly the way that was designed all the way along, this season. You bring in Derek Carr, he's just good enough to make you to the playoffs by winning a bad division, and that's probably all you can expect. They're on the outside looking in right now, but it's definitely possible that they could be on the inside. And actually, in the second half of the season, Derek Carr has been an awful lot better, even battling through all these injuries. It's actually, Derek Carr takes a lot of crap because he is a quarterback with a fairly defined ceiling, I think. But there's a lot to praise him for. Like, he has battled through 2 or 3 injuries this year that I think should have shut him down for periods of time and didn't. You had the absolute disaster with the Raiders when John Gruden and Henry Ruggs and all those kinds of things. Like, his leadership performance during that time was pretty impressive as well. So there's a lot of reasons Derek Carr should get praise and probably doesn't because he's always a quarterback you're looking to move on from. But 4 out of the last 5 weeks, he's had PFF grades firmly in the dark green, not just above average, but good. Only has 2 turnover-worthy plays in that period of time. Derek Carr's been playing the kind of football in the second half of the season that should get them to the playoffs. It's just he might have already dug too deep a hole for that to happen.
And you know where it's landed. I think the grading tells a good story. I used the mid-tier quarterback, not mid-tier quarterbacks. They have their highs, they have their lows, and it often evens out at the end of the season. Last year, Carr had the lowest grade of his career since his rookie season. And then early in this year, he looked like he was on pace for another grade in the 60s. But he's right now at 76.5. He's had other career season grades, 77, 79, 73, a 76. He's had those at various points in his career. That's usually where he lands, in the high 70s,
right? We're
mid to high 70s, maybe a low 80s grade. That is the expectation. And again, in New Orleans with this team, it should be good enough. Should have been good enough this year, even though the ebbs and flows were not great.
I haven't run the numbers, but just eyeballing it, he's looking like he's going to end up with a grade that pretty much sits right bang average in his Las Vegas annual grading. Like
That's it.
that ranged from
And you can
60,
get an 84 like you did in 2020. You can get an 86 like you get or an 85 in 2016.
that ranged from like 66 to 85, but I think it probably shakes out to like a high 70s overall on average, and that's where he's ending up now.
All right, man. All that said, Saints playing for their playoff lives, favored by 3 against the Falcons.
Yeah, and I do think it matters to both teams. So I don't think this is one where just because the Saints need it, they're going to have the success. I think Atlanta wants this game as well. I will go with the Saints, but I don't love it.
I don't love any Saints pick.
Well, that too.
I'm going to pick Atlanta only because of that.
Arthur Smith stan. I see.
Arthur Smith stan. No, I'm going to pick Atlanta because every time New Orleans convinces me that they've turned it around,
You're anticipating being let down.
I'm anticipating disappointment.
Yeah.
So I would normally pick New Orleans here. I would let the last thing I saw influence me with the Saints.
Now you've learned.
And I refuse to do
In
that.
Week 18.
Got to tell you about our friends over at AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. We drink it every single day here on the PFF NFL podcast. Love AG1 because it gives me all of the nutrients that my body needs to kick off the day. I like to drink it with my coffee in the morning. You just mix it with water, drink it down. Great way to kick things off. Cover all of the nutritional bases to kick off your day. AG1, they've been with us for a while here. We've heard a lot of good feedback from our listeners, from our viewers, that they're getting on board as well, making it a part of their daily routine. So a lot of great athletes, they have one thing in common. They take care of their bodies. Huge part of that starts with optimizing whole body health, and a lot of them also drink AG1. Kind of wish I had it when I was a player, Sam. Get all those nutrients.
I mean, that would have been the difference.
That would have been the difference. I would have been in the big leagues if I had AG1 and the 75 high-quality ingredients that give me the key daily nutrients to support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. Maybe would have added 2 to 3 miles an hour to my fastball.
I can't see how it wouldn't.
Results not typical, but it could have been a possibility.
Or in fact guaranteed.
It's that micro habit that delivers macro benefits that helps just about everybody take great care of their health every single day. Also love that it costs less than $3 a day. Pretty good if you ask me. It's this really effective daily habit with high-quality sourced ingredients that's a win-win for all of us here on the PFF NFL podcast. So for comprehensive solutions, what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. You go to drinkag1.com/PFF. That's drinkag1.com/PFF. Go check it out right now. Get some AG1. All right, the last 1 o'clock game, Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tennessee Titans. Mentioned a few times on the show here. A must-win for Jacksonville. If they win, they're in as the AFC South champions, favored by 5.5 over the Tennessee Titans. It looks like Trevor Lawrence should be back from his plethora of injuries.
Plethora, good word.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah, Lawrence probably going to be back in this game. I think it makes a big difference for them, but Lawrence hadn't been playing well through the injuries. It's one of those interesting situations where you're like, at what point is the line between hampered Trevor Lawrence and healthy CJ Beathard? Like, where is that? Because Lawrence hadn't been playing well trying to get through those injuries. Do we know if Levis is playing? Because that may be the bigger question to me.
I feel like Levis elevates the ceiling
Yes.
for the Titans in this potential. In this
I will
game,
say, I mean, Tennessee have been the team. Their chickens have come home to roost this season. For the second year in a row, they are going to finish at the year, I think, with the 32nd ranked offensive line in the NFL by our numbers, right? So dead ass last for 2 seasons straight. You can't have success if that's what's going to happen. I was on Ramon, Kayla, and what's the other guy's name? Will,
yeah.
I was on their show this morning, and they were saying that Tannehill had made a comment after the game last time that he felt like John Wick, where he'd just been taking an absolute battering from everywhere. And obviously Ramon, who's a former offensive lineman, was like, that's quite a slight to your offensive line. It is, but it's true.
Very true.
It's hard to argue with the accuracy of the statement.
Tannehill's like, I'm not going to be here next year.
Yeah, I mean, for
these
him,
guys probably won't be here either because
Right.
they're terrible, so why not?
Right. None of us are going to be here next year. I'm probably not starting this week if Levis is back. What the hell? Who cares? But that's been the story of that team. Like, the offensive line has been awful. Tannehill can't function behind it. Levis barely functions behind it, but has enough, A, suicidal tendencies, and B, just the arm to fire in some passes anyway. the running game, like both running backs, Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears, have both been amazing. If they had any sort of offensive line in front of them, we would be looking at that and saying that's the best backfield in the NFL. But they don't. Like, those guys are just making it work by themselves. The Titans just don't have enough.
Pass blocking grade of 36 last week for the Tennessee Titans, by the way. Yeah, it's been rough. The entire line, tackles, situation, guards, Peter Skoronski not. I mean, it all feeds off each other as well.
If you have 4 out of 5 guys in the offensive line that are pretty bad, the one rookie that you expect to come in and fix it is probably not going to look great.
And then Jacksonville last week did a pretty good job taking advantage of the Panthers' offensive line. And that's where the Jags pass rush really only shows up. They have those games every now and again where it feels like they've got a great pass rush, or they'll get a bunch of sacks, and it usually comes against bad offensive lines. So they do have an opportunity to just create a whole lot of havoc against whichever Titans quarterback. Will Levis did not practice yesterday with a foot injury.
Tannehill. Don't love it.
I mean, either guy under pressure. But Levis has the highest average depth of target in the NFL. Tannehill's high, too, because that's what the offense is doing. But Levis is just going to chuck it deep and see what happens. Jags finally played better on the back ends. They had been getting torched in recent weeks defensively, no matter who they went up against, whether it was the Bucs on Christmas Eve, it was the Bengals a few weeks ago, Jake Browning's breakout game. The Jacksonville defense played their best game last week in quite a while, so they're going to need more of that in this must-win game against the Titans.
This is so, you talk about narratives and how sometimes they can come from just statistical quirks that aren't necessarily real. Trayvon Walker is currently on a run of 6 sacks in 6 games, and he's now going up against the Titans' offensive line. He's going to finish the season with 8 sacks in 7 games, and we're going to be hearing all offseason about how he's turned a corner and he's become a superstar. And his PFF grade, his pass rushing grade is 58, which is the same as it was a year ago.
Yeah, it's an interesting narrative around Trayvon Walker. He had a really nice sack last week, lined up over the guard, had a nice quick win. He had another one where he tracked down Bryce Young in a cleanup situation. Our friend Pete Prisco, got to get Pete on the podcast. Talk to old crotchety Pete at the Super Bowl or something. But Pete was trying to explain that he doesn't think Trayvon Walker's doing a great job, winning and
I bet
creating
that went
pressure.
down well.
And despite the sacks, and I'm like, Pete, just use PFF grades. You've been reluctant all these years. The grades will tell you the story. Interestingly enough, the ESPN pass rush win rate, their win rate has him high, which I'm curious about with Trayvon. But I'll have to talk to my ESPN friends when I see them over at Sloan next year. Either way, there is a narrative around Trayvon Walker that he's like an elite run defender and he's getting all this pressure. And I don't think, from what we've seen,
I don't think any
is true.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think any positive aspect of the narrative on Trayvon Walker is true, other than his freaky athleticism, which does show up. I forget. I was watching his tape recently. Might have been against the Bengals. I forget where it was, but there was one play in it where he just jumps inside, absolutely whoops the offensive tackle. That's amazing. There are not many tackles in the NFL that are going to be able to live with that sort of Euro step inside move that he had.
He's got some high-end plays like
that.
that.
But you're that's why they drafted him number 1, because there's only a handful of guys on the planet that can do that, even at this level. It's him, it's Myles Garrett, it's Micah Parsons. That's that might be it. That might be the end of the list. But the difference is those guys do that 5 times a game, and you do it once every other game.
We have him with 10 sacks, so Trayvon Walker, 10 sacks.
Twice the number of last year with the same pass rushing grade.
He's going to have 20 next year.
Yeah, well, I mean,
last year he had more penalties than sacks.
That's the trajectory he's on. Double it every year.
I will say, I mean, I'm trying to be objective about this stuff. It's no bias either way. This was the point in Rashawn Gary's career where he turned things around. Rashawn Gary.
But he also turned it around grading-wise.
But he turned it. I know that. But so I'm saying, there's still a world where the grading can turn around. He can win more as well. And I think he's done well over the guard when nickel situations where you're rushing against guards.
I'm not saying he doesn't do anything well ever, but he plays almost all of the snaps. So he's going to have some positive plays in his take. He's not a guy that simply has no business being in the NFL, but he doesn't make enough positive plays relative. He's played 800 snaps already twice in his career. Last season was 3 shy of 900. This season, he's already at 823. There are going to be some positive plays in there. And because he's that freaky athletic, the positive plays tend to look quite spectacular. But when you're playing that much, you need to do it more often. Like, that's the bottom line. And the thing with Rashawn Gary is, yeah, sometimes it's going to take 2 years or whatever to become that guy. But when Gary started to get it, it started to show quite early on in his grading. Whereas Trayvon Walker is just on a good run of sacks.
No, I get it. I mean, Gary started in like the last quarter of his second season.
Yeah.
And he didn't play every snap. I will say Walker's been durable, played a ton of ball. Either way, we had picked the game. Jaguars favored by 5.5. AFC South on the line here.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to beat Tennessee, go to the playoffs, and host Joe Flacco and the Browns.
Ooh.
Kansas City Chiefs. We're getting into the 425s now. Kansas City Chiefs at the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers favored by 3.5 here, of course, against the Chiefs. Because Blaine Gabbert getting the start for Kansas City.
How many points is Blaine Gabbert worth to the spread?
I mean, it's Gabbert plus. Rashee Rice isn't playing, and it's the Chiefs' backups against, well, the Chargers' backups. It's Easton Stick.
Is Gabbert, we have seen this in the past, is Gabbert worth a negative amount to the spread?
I don't know.
Like, if Gabbert plays, are they actually worse than if a replacement-level quarterback plays?
He actually hasn't played that poorly in the last 6 years or whatever when he's had his few opportunities. Like, the last extended time we saw was San Francisco, maybe. And then, it was okay in backup situations behind Brady and Tampa. I know he threw a pick in one game this year, and you were like, oh, of course it's Blaine Gabbert. It's one play. It's only one play, though. So, Gabbert.
It's all Blaine needs.
There's really nothing to say here. The Chiefs are locked into the number 3 seed.
Yeah. I mean, they're a team with nothing to play for.
They have nothing to play for. The other interesting aspect here, and I've pointed it out on the podcast a few times, the last 6 weeks or so, every Chiefs game has been against a team with more rest than them, either coming off a bye or a Thursday night game or a Saturday game or whatever it might have been. And I feel like this might also be a way for them to just recapture some of that, some health, some rest. It's not a full bye week. It's not the Andy Reid bye week deal, but it's a week to reset, rest Mahomes, probably rest Kelsey, rest Rashee Rice, whoever else they decide on both sides of the ball, get ready to host a playoff game next week, whether it's against Buffalo, Miami, could be Houston, it could be one of 5 different teams, 6 different teams. But you do get to take a little break here.
Yeah, versus a Chargers team that's already down to backups anyway just because of injuries.
Yeah. I mean, Chargers, they've played tough defensively the last few weeks. They've played better defensively since firing their defensive coordinator / head coach, Brandon Staley.
That's not a great look for Staley.
Not at all. They've played better. They're just, I think they're limited with, Easton Stick, I think, has actually played okay, but they're just so depleted at receiver. They're more hurt at receiver.
Quentin Johnson has not made any impact. Like Alex Erickson, who's been the alpha receiver for them at the moment, not Quentin Johnson, their first-round pick. He is a one-trick pony whose one trick is being taken away.
Yeah, no one's talking about Easton Stick and the lack of weapons that they've built around him.
Right.
No one's talking about that.
No.
People should be talking about that.
The Chargers have let down Easton Stick.
They have.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pick this game. Chargers by 3.5.
Ugh. I hate picking the Chargers, but Kansas City is going to rest everybody. So the Chargers, Easton Stick.
I'll still take Kansas City, I think.
I can't pick Blaine Gabbert. I can't do that.
Blaine Gabbert has never lost an AFC West division game in December.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Great nugget.
It's the first one. Speaking of great games, Los Angeles Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. Niners favored by 4. Again, 2 teams locked into the playoff picture, but not seeding-wise. The Niners are the number 1 seed, so they're going with Darnold to start. Carson Wentz gets the start for the Rams, who are in the playoffs, currently the number 6 seed, with a beautiful storyline. Like, we're all rooting for this, right? Rams going into Detroit, Stafford's return to the team that traded him, Jared Goff, the team that got rid of him, and he's the higher seed. Like, that's what we want to see, right? But the Rams, instead of locking it in at 6 and playing for the win, are saying we're going to rest up. That's more important than the 6 or 7 seed.
They don't care about your fairy tale ending. They want to win. They want a championship. You don't get championships by playing stories.
Now, there were times where I feel like teams looked at the potential tournament bracket, say, and they said we could have the number 1 seed or, you know, 1 and 2, the 1 and 2 seed both were buys back in the day.
Yeah.
There were games where I felt like Belichick and the Patriots
Is that back in the day already?
Back in the
That was
day.
like 3 years ago.
Just to remind people, we might have a whole bunch of
children,
Zoomers, you know, listen to us here. So back in the day, there were times where I feel like New England was like, the 2 seed's better than the 1 seed because of whatever the seeding was going to look like.
Right. The bye is the big thing. The bye has always been the big thing.
But I'm saying they didn't care about 1 versus 2.
No, I know.
For this, the Rams could easily look at this and say, we could go to Detroit or we could go to Dallas. We would much rather go to Detroit. No offense to the Lions, but we would rather go to Detroit, in part because we saw what happened in Dallas before. They're tough to beat at home. We'll take our chances with the Lions. I don't think the Rams are making a tactical decision as far as who they play here. I think they're just making a rest the starters.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think whether it was the old system where the first 2 seeds had a bye, or whether it's this system where only 1 seed has a bye, I think the bye is the important thing. Like, the rest of it is just window dressing. And certainly I think teams are determining that the difference in risk between losing a seed and having to go to a different team is irrelevant relative to the risk of losing your quarterback in a game by playing him in a meaningless Week 18 game. I think the only way effectively that teams are deciding that it's definitely worth playing all out to get the seeding change is if number 1 is still in play. If the difference is the bye week, if we can actually get a week off by playing hard in this game, let's play everybody and let's go for this. If the difference is just which venue are we going to, who cares?
Or maybe it's respect for the Lions.
Your respect.
It could be respect. We're not more afraid of Dallas than we are Detroit.
Maybe they know that Matthew Stafford in Detroit doesn't go well.
Possible. The run game disappears.
They've seen years of that.
Yeah. The refs will be against them.
There's no Calvin Johnson this time.
I'll say this, too. Here's an interesting idea with Detroit. Makeup calls. We've talked about how our makeup calls, by design, are simply human nature.
Dude, what if they get Brad Allen to play?
Other than the Saints. I feel like the Saints never get the calls. But the refs have not come around to the makeup calls yet for the Saints.
They're due a lot.
Yeah. But I do wonder if there'll be this subconscious for the Lions.
First iffy call that goes Detroit's way in the postseason.
This might be pass interference, but remember we screwed them out of the 2 seed, so there's no flag on the play.
Yeah.
You know? Never know.
Right.
What's going to happen here.
Iffy Melifonwu will just tackle somebody deep down the field, and the official will be like, no. Play on. Let him play.
It's bang, bang. It's bang, bang. What did you see on that play? I saw a bang, bang play.
Guy tackled, ball sails 25 yards over his head. The rest, like, it was a bang, bang play. Nothing I could do.
Uncatchable. Just make something up.
And you can't review pass interference, so there's no. Our hands are tied.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Niners favored by 4 here. Backups versus backups.
Darnold versus Wentz. This is an interesting QB battle. What if this is the Rams get a view of what could have been. You know, we went with Jared Goff number 1 overall, and that worked for a bit, and then we got rid of him. What if we'd taken Wentz instead?
Learn a lot this week. Learn a lot.
And then Sam Darnold, it's the game that everybody's been clamoring for since Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold got there. Like, what would Sam Darnold look like in this offense? Probably an all-pro.
Darnold's going to look bad with the backups. He'll be like, see? Of course Purdy's the MVP. Darnold couldn't do this. Yeah, I'll take...
Voting, the ballot is due like the next day, Monday.
Oh, All-Pro?
All-Pro awards. Awards, I think, is actually due the day after for some reason. But yeah, the ballot's due after the week.
I have people use me as an advisor for that.
You're a consultant?
You might have a vote, but I'm a consultant for multiple voters.
Are you able to charge a consultancy fee?
I should.
Because I'll take that over the vote. If there's money to be made.
You owe me money, sir.
No, you know the drill. You send them a text that says, I assume you have my details for payment.
Yes.
That's what you do. You hit that. You hit all of the people you're consulting for. You just drop that text to them.
Who are you picking San Francisco by 4 here?
I'm going with the Sam Darnold-led San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, I think I'll do the same. Because I don't think the Rams aren't a great preseason team when they rest their guys.
Well, it's good. Yeah.
They don't play well in the preseason.
Well, usually because they don't have anybody playing in the preseason.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And they're doing that again. 4:25 game again. Dallas Cowboys at the Washington Commanders. Commanders are getting 13, so Dallas favored by almost 2 touchdowns here in Washington. If they win, they get the 2 seed.
Yeah, which, as we sort of analyzed previously, is kind of meaningless.
Yeah, because the 2 seed, you're looking at, you could play the Rams, you could play the Packers, you could play the Seahawks. I mean, it's, but you don't really know. They could all be anywhere. So
yeah,
the Packers could have a 6 seed.
It's probably more meaningful for Dallas because it does sort of determine how long you're going to be playing at home.
A Packers-Lions first-round playoff matchup would be interesting. I think that's still on the table.
Yeah. Washington, Sam Howell is about to become the first quarterback to play a full season schedule for Washington. I forget since what the last guy, but a long time, which is ironic because they benched him. Like, he's about to become the first quarterback to play every single game in years, and they tried not to make that happen by sitting him down last week, only for Jacoby Brissett to pull a hamstring and him having to play anyway. And it sounds like he'll have to play this game as well. So he ends up being the first full season starter for them in a long period of time, even though he has played himself to the bench.
In addition to, my usual take is that quarterback health is very much on them and playing style. And the fact that he sometimes looks like a ping pong ball in the pocket and still remained healthy after, that's impressive.
Man's durable. Give him that.
He's been durable. Last year, Week 18. I want to go back to what happened there, because
of course you do. Because the one thing more interesting than meaningless Week 18 games this year is previous Week 18 meaningless games.
It wasn't a meaningless game,
wasn't it?
Dallas, I think they needed to win for something. They were playing for something. We were sitting here defending Dak Prescott while the shouty shows kept saying, his interceptions are terrible. They're terrible. I don't care if they were dropped. They're bad. It's all on Dak Prescott. He's the worst. And we're like, no. Turnover-worthy plays are down. It's all right. Dak's taking care of the ball. And they go into Washington in Week 18. Sam Howell's first start, mind you. They lose 26-6. They had the playoffs locked up, but they lose 26-6. Dak goes, do you remember this? 14 for 37. 14 for 37 with a 43 passing grade. I cannot believe how many grades in the 40s Dak has over the last 2 years. Wow. He's got 6 in the 40s or lower over the last 2 years. I know he's got 3 this year. Last year he had a 36, a 43, and a 37. But they go into Washington last year. Dak throws a pick 6. It was only 1 interception, but he was horrible. 3 turnover-worthy plays and only 1 interception.
Yeah.
Right? Offset. And I'm not saying that's going to happen again this year, but it's just interesting scenario here. That was Sam Howell's first start. Sam Howell did pretty well enough that they gave him the starting job this year. That's why we're at. That's why we are where we are. But I think Dallas will not let that happen again, and they'll go and
I'd like to see Sam Howell at least go out on a half decent game. I mean, it's been kind of sad watching his decline over the course of the year. It was intriguing. He was exciting earlier in the season. It was a fun experiment. If nothing else, I'm a big proponent or fan of giving these guys a shot, right? These sort of fifth rounders who are intriguing and have the tool set and all those kinds of things. Like, they don't tend to get given starting jobs for a season. It doesn't happen. Teams are too invested in the first round guy or the retread or the big money free agent or trade candidate or whatever. These fifth rounders just don't get given a shot. So on the one hand, it's disappointing that he hasn't been able to maximize it because it just it entrenches that attitude of, well, those guys are fifth round picks for a reason. Let's not give them an opportunity. But also from his perspective, like, he did have a shot. He has a lot of NFL tools and then has just kind of ridden it into a rut and hasn't been able to crawl his way out of it. And that's the end of his opportunity. Like, he'll be a backup now. But I'd at least like to see him go out on a high note, even if it's the end of his, starting career.
They played on Thanksgiving in Dallas, of course, 45-10. But Washington played pretty well for the first half.
That was another one of those. Yeah, it was another one of those games that Washington held tough for a while, and then Dallas showed, like, when they're beating bad teams, they just put the gas pedal down to the bottom of the floor and rack up like a ton of points quickly.
Commanders have lost 7 straight. I expect it to be 8. even though I painted that picture of what happened last year. Their last win was against New England in Week 9. So Dallas favored by 13 with the 2 seed on the line, which means that's a second round playoff game.
Yeah.
I mean, home game.
Home game. Which
that's
for Dallas,
the difference between maybe Detroit, going to Detroit, or Detroit coming to you if the seeding.
I mean, I think there's a widespread perception that home field advantage means more to Dallas than most teams.
Yes.
Like, they want to be playing at home. They do not want to be going on the road anywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's indoors or outdoors. They want to be at home. And the 2 seed does give them an extra game doing that relative to others.
And it's not just that. The alternative is the 5 seed. So the alternative is they don't win the division. The Eagles get the 2 seed.
Right.
And so, yeah, Dallas is playing to win. And so they don't leave Jerry World until they go to San Francisco, theoretically, in this one. Where are you going?
I am going to riding with Washington, keeping it within 2 touchdowns once.
All right, I'll take Dallas.
Come on. End it on a good note. Just 10-point loss. That's all you need.
That's a 10-point loss for your guy, Sam Howell. Also at 425, Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. We got Jarrett Stidham and Aiden O'Connell going head-to-head here.
This week will, assuming everybody starts that is supposed to start, this week will tie apparently an NFL record for the most quarterbacks used in a season, starting quarterbacks.
Didn't we break that last year?
No, this year has been unusually high. Like, this year was on a ridiculous pace, and this week will set the record or tie the record if everybody that's reported to start starts.
The added interesting element to that is, as you're looking at NFL draft quarterbacks, there are a legit 8, 10, 12 guys that you could see starting in the NFL. Like, just when we watched Aiden O'Connell last year, you could see him being on a roster and getting spot starts. And here he is. There's a lot of those guys in college right now. So interesting times as far as the QB position goes. Raiders favored by 2.5. I don't think no team in the AFC West will have a winning record.
Is this officially a dead rubber? This means nothing to anybody? Or Denver technically still alive?
No, they're all out.
Okay.
There's nothing.
So this is literally nothing to play for anybody.
Eliminated. Yeah. Denver could have a winning record, actually. They could go 9-8.
That would be quite impressive. They were 1-5. Did they start?
Yeah,
that would be quite impressive
nice
as a turnaround. Yeah, even though you've blown it all up already by benching Russell Wilson and effectively declaring that you're about to plunge your team into salary cap hell and move in a different direction with no obvious one available. By the way, it's not like they don't have the number 1 pick locked in. They've just declared that Russell Wilson isn't the guy. We have no earthly idea who is, but it ain't him.
This is another game where the division teams played in Week 1 and Week 18.
Yeah.
Back in Week 1, it was Jimmy Garoppolo versus Russell Wilson.
I feel like that's too far. Like, I don't like the ones where they play two times in 3 weeks.
2 and 3 weeks is obnoxious.
But I also don't like it where it's 1 and 18, where like these are 2 completely different teams.
Might as well be different seasons.
Yeah, it's like completely irrelevant what happened in Week 1. They need some sort of middle ground, right? If you're going to have them at Week 18, I need like a Week 9, midway through the year.
We had Mike Kliss on years ago. He's like, the Raiders just beat the Broncos all the time. What are their recent records here? Got to take the Raiders, right? They own Denver.
Because of history?
Because of history. They lost to the Raiders twice last year. When was the last time they beat the Raiders, Sam?
I don't know.
You
tell me. You're looking.
21. Nope. Let's see, 20. Where's Walt when you go check the chat? Somebody's going to have the answer
page
here.
by page? There's like a...
I'm going page by page, yes, on our site. In 2020, did they? Nope. It wasn't 2020. Was it 19?
I can't believe this is the podcast.
The Oakland Raiders. Yeah, they beat the Oakland Raiders. They've never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders.
Never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders.
Week 17 of 2019, the Broncos beat the Oakland Raiders. Let's see who are the QBs there. Drew Lock was the last Broncos quarterback to beat the Raiders against Derek Carr. There you go.
What a story. Glad we did that. That was an important piece of information to impart to the people.
I'm not adding any other analysis to this game.
That's all you got?
I'll take the Raiders.
Okay. Patrick, why do I keep calling him Patrick Peterson? Patrick Surtain against Devontae Adams is always fun. Fun viewing.
There were also people pushing a little Tyree Wilson, doing a little better rushing from the interior. I think there's some kernels of truth there. Always interested in the I mean, I like watching all these games for the player development and everything, but from a what does this mean in the NFL season standpoint, of course we know it. It's nothing.
It's nothing.
I'll take the Raiders covering the 2.5. Where are you going?
I went with Denver.
Oh, that's wrong.
What?
That's never going to happen.
Oh, okay.
Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals. Seahawks favored by 2.5 at Arizona. They've got playoff positioning on the line. Seattle, disappointing loss last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need a win plus a Green Bay loss or tie, or some tie scenarios.
Good. Thank you for not reading them out.
Tie scenarios.
Great game from Arizona last week, particularly the offense. I mean, the run game was dominant, but Kyler Murray had his best game since coming back as well. I don't think that necessarily matters. The more I think about the Kyler Murray situation, the more I think it's like their default position as an organization, new GM, new head coach, new structure, has got to be, given the contract he's already signed, do we see anything in the final however many games he played to say that he can't be the quarterback? Otherwise, he's the guy, because you're kind of stuck with him. You could move away from him, but like given he's there, he's young, he's talented, we've seen a lot of good from him in the past, I kind of assume that your starting point should be, is there a reason this can't work? Otherwise, he's the guy. And I don't think we've seen one of those yet. I think he's shown physically he's 100%. He's got a track record of being an explosive playmaker as well as an athletic threat. He's an accurate quarterback. He's always had a high adjusted completion rate, good ball location, all those kinds of things. So I think they're going to be going with him regardless of what happens. But they're in a team in a situation where they have a shot at a really high draft pick, and they also have a shot of winning a game and taking them out of that. So what do?
Play to win.
Play to win.
You're going to try to win here.
You play to win the games.
Arizona, it's tough to. I mean, I read the YouTube comments. One of our YouTube commenters said we didn't mention Jonathan Gannon as a part of last week's game with the Eagles, which is maybe an oversight by us, right? He was last year's defensive coordinator for the Eagles.
As part of the reason for the decline.
Well, I think there's the decline, and also
as a storyline in the game.
In that game, in particular, as how they dominated the Eagles, and Gannon maybe has done he's done a nice job at trying to figure out when the Cardinals are going to play their best game. Like the Cardinals have played some games this year where they looked like the team that should have picked number 1 overall. They've played other games this year where it's like, oh, good for Gannon, because they have a number 1 overall team type of roster, and they beat the Cowboys, and they beat the Steelers, and they beat the Eagles, and they're really competitive. Don't know when those games are going to show up, but in any given week, man, they ran the ball really well. James Conner did a great job last week, and what Seattle struggled with last week was tackling. Seattle missed 15 tackles in the run game alone, with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren running all over them. I'll reiterate, I was trying to explain, because a lot of people say, well, you gave up 200 yards on the ground, you lost in the trenches, which paints this picture of your defensive line getting moved like 5 yards off the ball every single time. It wasn't the case. Seattle was a disaster last week in gap assignment and missed tackles. It wasn't just a physical beatdown, but you could say it's a physical beatdown if you don't tackle well, but it wasn't like their defensive line just getting wrecked. So Seattle's got to do a better job of stopping the run, because Arizona is capable with James Conner back there, and they're capable any given week with Kyler Murray.
Definitely. I mean, Kyler Murray, he had his best game. He didn't have a ton of explosive plays last week, but he's capable of those. Like, that's the thing that he brings to the table is he's accurate. If they can establish a pretty powerful ground game and rely on the run game, and that's going to open stuff up for Kyler Murray as well. So, I think Arizona's offense can do some damage against Seattle. And then it's a case of, do they have enough on defense to slow down the Seahawks?
So that part I don't think they do. The first game was only 20-10. Seattle won at home. But Geno Smith's playing really well these last few weeks, really since that Thursday night game against Dallas. He's played extremely well. Not great against San Francisco, but since that point, Philly, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, he's thrown the ball well. A couple fourth down. I know the Eagles game was Drew Lock, but they've had a couple fourth quarter comebacks, both against the Eagles Monday Night Football and then that Week 16 game against the Titans. Seattle should win this game, though. But the fact that it's only 2.5 at Arizona, that's saying, look, this Cardinals team's feisty. You never know when they're going to show up to play.
You don't. I do wonder, how motivated Arizona is going to be, though, to win this game. I mean, they are a team that can do themselves a lot of damage by winning another game.
I agree.
And they're capable of beating anybody.
They could be anywhere from 2 to 4, right? As far as the...
No, they can be... I mean, they are right now, they're 4. They could get as high as 2. They could also, with a win, drop themselves as far as, like, 7?
With a with a loss,
yeah,
they could be anywhere from 2 to 4. So they have
could,
potential
but
to be up at 2 or be
they
down.
probably won't be. Their strength of schedule is actually a lot because they've beaten these good teams. Their strength of schedule is actually a lot worse or better, whichever way you want to look at it, than the 2 teams they're tied with. But the point there is, if they win another game, their strength of schedule is so strong that it actually drops them below all of the other teams they'd be tied with as well. So if they won and the Giants, Chargers, and Titans all lost, they'd drop below all of those teams in the draft order. So they can drop all the way down to 7 with a win here, which would be, I mean, that's, you know, they were expected to be the worst team in the NFL. We thought they would be picking 1 or 2. If instead they end up picking 7 with a team that wasn't much better than that, they just somehow timed ridiculous wins against Dallas, Philadelphia, and all those, that would be terrible.
It is probably in their best interest to lose this game.
Yeah, or at least, you know, not try that hard to win.
Exactly. All right, 2.5 in Arizona. Where are you going with this one?
Seahawks.
Same.
For that reason alone.
Also take the Seahawks. All right, just 2 more games in our regular season previews. How many games are there now? 272?
Yeah, I don't know.
There's 272.
I forgot that math once it stopped being what it
game
was.
271 of our previews this year. Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants. Eagles favored by 5 here. If they win, they're still rooting for Dallas to lose to potentially win the NFC East. But the Eagles, hard to not feel like they blew one last week against Arizona. Not only losing the game, but they had a 2-touchdown lead and had the NFC East in their grasp. But yeah, the defense has been a dud. This is a rematch from Christmas Eve just 2 weeks ago. Eagles and Giants, where the Eagles won by 5, I believe it was, right? Favored by 5 here at the Giants.
Yeah, and I think it really has become a defensive problem now for Philadelphia. I think the offense is actually fine. Now, we're in this world of what's real and what isn't, right? There are reports in the media that A.J. Brown's attitude is rubbing people the wrong way, and it's causing a division in the locker room. Now, A.J. Brown has come out and said, there's no problem. Everybody's cool. In fact, I love Nick Sirianni. He took a bullet for us when he said I was trying to play for the pass interference when actually we just dialed something up ourselves and it was terrible. And he didn't have to do that. So, you know, if that's all just an invention of the media, then the offense, I think, is in good shape and not a problem at all heading into the postseason. If there's something there, then maybe it's a bigger problem. But right now, their issue is they can't stop anybody on defense. Like the pass rush that was much better early in the year isn't anymore. The back 7 was bad to begin with, and it's getting banged up, and it's even worse. So they're looking at teams, no matter who it is, and being like, a 2-touchdown lead is not safe because we can't stop them.
It's difficult for me as a former pro athlete. Mm-hmm. And I've already referenced the 05 tornadoes.
You have.
And the camaraderie,
amazing
and the
story.
unity that we had. And I'm, throwing a little bit more into my resume here. I'm a 2-time Can-Am League champion.
Yeah?
2 different teams. Worcester Tornadoes, Nashua Pride.
Is that more impressive than doing it twice with one team?
I mean, I had 2 different coaches, I think it is.
2 different playbooks.
Yeah. It's like when Brady goes and wins with Bruce Arians.
It's
show you
more
can win
impressive.
elsewhere. I had to show that I could win outside of the cocoon of Worcester, But both of those, I'll just say it's really a chicken or an egg thing. Going back to this is A.J. Brown's attitude the reason why the Eagles can't cover? And the reason why they gave up over 200 yards on the ground last week. Is that why?
Yeah.
Because A.J. Brown.
Doesn't feel like it.
His attitude, right? So my point, like the locker room stuff, it really is like winning takes care of that. So a lot of times you're winning and it's like, I like my teammates. I mean, I do like this. Right. I like the environment. And then you start losing, and it's like, oh man, it's the attitudes. Nobody's coming to work.
I mean, look at the Steelers, right? Like they had a locker room a few weeks ago where George Pickens was like, I'm not blocking for this guy. I don't want to get hurt. And the team, like the guy he wasn't blocking for was like, I mean, I'd have blocked for him. That's pretty weak. Like that's pretty bad in terms of what can happen in the locker room. And then they win from that point on, so nobody cares, and everybody's joking with George Pickens. It's like, hey, George, go score another one, win us this game, and everybody's happy, right? You're right. Like, winning takes care of most of these things. But when you start to head into the postseason, like, all of this stuff gets magnified because the pressure's higher, because it's, you know, there's no margin for error. It's win or go home. And if there's anything not right.
The analysis is usually like a post-mortem, though. It's like, why have the Eagles lost 4 or 5? Oh, man, they've been at odds. You know, it's been rough. You know, the locker, A.J. Brown. It's always like a post-mortem. It's never like foresight. Nobody's ever like, man, Eagles have this fractured locker room. Let's see how it plays out. Oh, no, they just won 6 in a row. I guess it's okay.
Right.
You know, I mean,
but I doubt it
nobody
helps.
does it ahead of time.
No, but I doubt. But if it is a thing and it does exist, even if you've papered over it by winning, it probably doesn't help your endeavor to win a Super Bowl.
I guess I do. I just want to be honest with it. Like, I struggle with, as an analyst who relies a lot on numbers in my eyes, I struggle with the thing that we don't see, that is coming from like third-hand sources.
Yeah.
Right. I struggle with that stuff. I don't think it doesn't exist.
Well, yeah.
I've felt it. Right. So my point is, I've felt what it feels to be good and what it feels to be on a bad team. Like where it doesn't feel good. I understand that. I just don't know how to add it to the equation.
The problem is twofold. Number one, that it is very dependent on whether you're winning or losing. And number two, that we have no idea if it's invented or not and if it's real or not in this particular or in any individual scenario, right? It could be it's absolutely a thing and half the locker room hates a given guy, right? And it's pissing people off and they're not focused because of it and it is an issue. Or it could just be some random guy in the media heard something, put it out there, and now it's something that everybody has to talk about because we've seen a couple of video clips of a guy looking pissed off on the sideline. You know what I mean? Like, so remember.
Oh, the sideline stuff drives me crazy, though.
Like, remember,
absolutely crazy. And we let people get away with it.
Remember, there was a narrative for a long time of what a problem Jay Cutler's body language was, right? Because he just has a default facial expression of misery. Like, there's that meme where he has like
Resting
a cigarette.
Cutler face.
Yeah, where he has like a cigarette dangling out of the corner of his mouth. And that looks like how he should exist at all times. And there was, because Jay Cutler was Jay Cutler, this became like a thing of, well, his body language is bad, therefore the team stinks and he doesn't win and, you know, he's not as good as he should be. It's like, well, maybe he just looks like that and it's irrelevant and this only exists in the head of the people who are talking about it. We don't know either way. Like, it could be, we're not in the locker room. We don't know if the entire team spends their time going, man, our quarterback's bummed out. That's why we can't win. Or if it's just, that's what he looks like. He has resting, you know, Cutler face.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. Like
RCF.
The Manning face. That didn't stop them winning games. So who knows?
Anyway, Philadelphia, I mean, so what's happened to the defense? Since week 11, they beat Kansas City, Monday Night Football, 21-17. So they allow 17 to Kansas City. Since that point, 34 points to the Bills, 42 to the 49ers, 33 to the Cowboys, 20 to the Seahawks, which had Drew Lock at quarterback, who led a game-winning drive against them, 25 to the Giants, and then 35 to the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, I think they're going to beat the Giants. I'll even pick the Eagles to cover. But the defense is a massive issue, to the point where if they are the 5 seed going to Tampa or New Orleans, if there's if that ever happened, there's concerns. Their whole back seven, the cornerbacks, the linebackers, the pass rush isn't good enough right now. They're still a talented team, but nothing's working on that side of the ball, and that's an issue for the Eagles. I'm with you too. I think the offense I've had concerns about too, but they have enough pieces. Hurts looks healthier.
Yeah.
And, I think they can do what they need to do offensively.
I think they've actually turned it around a little bit. Now, again, remember a few weeks ago that the narrative was nothing they do in the last few weeks is going to matter because they're going up against the Giants twice and the Cardinals.
Oh, you're being influenced.
Now, they lost one of those games, so apparently there is something to be taken from it. But the point being, you have to factor in the fact that everything should be looking better. So even though we're saying the offense does look better, it was expected to. So it might not be real. It might just be, par. It might just be they've met expectations. But that is more than you can say for the defense, which has not been able to meet expectations, even adjusting for the fact that they're going up against worse teams. You have to be concerned by the total lack of pressure this team is applying right now. Like, nobody is getting a ton of heat on the opposing quarterbacks, even though they've got some good players up front. Like Hassan Reddick a couple of weeks ago had a 6 pressure game. against the Giants, against a bad offensive tackle on that side. That's it, though. Like, Josh Sweat has chipped in with a couple of pressures, Brandon Graham, Jalen Carter, but they're not dominating up front anymore.
The two lowest pass rush grades, to your point, for the Eagles this year. Week 14 at Dallas. Week 17 last week against Arizona. Now, Dallas, you understand why that could happen. But Arizona, and that offensive line, the Eagles do not have that dominant pass rush that they not only had last year on the Super Bowl run, but they've been a top 5 pass rush team, I think, every year back to 2016.
Yeah. It's a team institutional philosophy. Like, make sure we have pass rushers and not just 4 of them, 6, 7, 8.
They're still 7th right now in team pass rush grade. So they're still, like, season-wise, but the last few weeks have not been great. All that said, they're a better team than the Giants. We're going to see Tyrod Taylor. Can he create some big plays? He came back. He came out in relief of Tommy DeVito on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. And did bring the Giants back a little bit. But, all right, Eagles favored by 5 here.
The other last element of that defensive performance a week ago was the same as the Seahawks, missed tackles. They missed 13. We were talking about Seattle missing 15. Okay, just in the run game, so theirs was worse. But the Eagles adding to the problems on defense by missing tackles is not helping either.
A few weeks ago, I thought they just looked tired because they ran into this run. They just looked bad.
Yeah.
They just looked bad.
I'm going to bank on the Giants and Tyrod keeping this within 5, given their defense.
I am too. I think we have the same picks across the board. A couple differences. All right, game of the week time. Sunday Night Football. Game 272. Is it 272?
You keep asking that like I'm going to know any more this time than I did the last time you asked the question.
282, whatever it is. Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. AFC East on the line. Bills favored by 3 in Miami. Of course, rematch they played back in week 3. And
still
week 4, Buffalo won 48-20. Lots changed since then, too. Matt Milano was still there for the Bills. Bills defense was cooking at that point. Miami offense was cooking, too. They were coming off a 70-point game with Denver before they went to Buffalo. Over these last couple of years, though, we've noticed, we've seen last year in Miami. Now, granted, it was early in the season, but in Miami, they beat the Bills 21-19. Remember, that was like the heat index was 1,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Then they played in the snow.
Only on Buffalo sideline, though.
Only on Buffalo sideline. Then they played in the snow in Buffalo week 15, and then they played in Buffalo for the playoffs without Tua. So the home field has been a huge part of the Dolphins-Bills these last couple seasons. So in Miami, but it's a night game. So you're not going to get the heat problems.
Yeah. It is funny trying to nail down the sort of the narrative or the perception on this Miami team right now, because it's all based off that Baltimore game. Like, they got absolutely smacked by the Ravens in a game where the number 1 seed was on the line, and now it's like, well, the number 1 seed is gone. And actually now we're going to say, not only are you out of the number 1 seed running, but like Buffalo's a better team. Miami is not even. They've sunk so far away from the number 1 seed conversation that we're talking about them still as the team that doesn't beat good teams. And are they even better than Buffalo, who could jump them for the division with a win here? It's sort of crazy how far the analysis on them has slipped based off just that one absolute beatdown against the Ravens.
But I think that also feeds into what the rest of the season has been.
Yeah, they were, before all that, they were the team that, only beat bad teams, didn't beat good teams. But then they beat Dallas. Now, okay, it's not like their offense cooked in that game, but Dallas has a good defense and a crazy good pass rush, and it sort of makes sense for that to be a relatively low-scoring game even. And early in the game, everyone was scoring at will. It was just a weird game. Anyway, they ended up getting the win, so they did beat a good team. But then it all comes crashing down because they follow it up by getting wrecked.
But you made the point after that game that Dallas had a lot of missed opportunities in that one. We also made the point when Dallas got whooped by Buffalo. Hey, a couple plays go the other way, and it's not as bad of a beatdown. Even though it was well-earned by Buffalo, but you get a couple plays the other way, and Dallas is closer in that game. I think that stuff matters.
But I think this is just the NFL this year, where outside of Baltimore, who every time they've been faced with one of these games has been decisive and resounding in their victory, and San Francisco, who outside of a couple of wobbles have been like that, everybody else just doesn't have the consistency. Like, they hit a game where they get destroyed by somebody, and then every team has one of those. And I don't know that there are, outside of those two number one seeds and two favorites, there are the dominant teams that we thought there were. So we keep, every week, 1 week it's going to be Miami as the team of the moment. The next week it's going to be Buffalo. Then Kansas City might get it together for a week. I think we're just going to be bouncing around these teams, but they're all kind of at the same level. It's just that it has a wide range of possible outcomes in any given weekend.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this. I think the perception is that Buffalo is a powerhouse team that would just shoot themselves in the foot over and over again, and it's their fault why they lost. It's Buffalo's own fault,
right?
Why they lost to Denver and why they lost to the Jets in Week 1, right? It's their own fault. Whereas with Miami, and I don't know if this is the wrong narrative, with Miami, it's like Dallas. They'll beat up on the bad teams, and when they get to a good team, they struggle. And here's some of the points I would make around that where that could be the case. Like when they faced Buffalo in Week 4, there isn't some like magical game plan to beat the Dolphins offense other than they just made the throws tighter. Like they were just more sound in coverage against this Miami team. They crowded the middle of the field. Baltimore did a lot of the same stuff. Miami has struggled offensively against Buffalo, the Chiefs, and the Ravens, 3 of the better defenses in the AFC. Miami's defense, did they turn a corner in the second half of the season? Remember all the on-off, the wit out, Jalen Ramsey. How much of that was true, or how much of that is when you go back through Miami season? Here are their top coverage grades. Jets, Patriots, right? Like Jets again, Broncos in Week 3, Raiders with Aiden O'Connell, Commanders, Giants. Those are their best coverage grades. Their worst grades, Ravens, Bills, Cowboys, all of the best quarterbacks that they played, right? How is Miami a team that is just as good as their opponent? They're great against bad teams, and they're just another team when it comes to some of these elite teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just perception, though. Like, the Bills are favored by 3 points on the road. And if Miami had even made it a close game against Baltimore and lost, how different would that line be? It just feels like all of the perception right now about Miami is based off that one game where they got destroyed by the Ravens. And that's not, they're not the only team that's happened to. Like the 49ers got wrecked the week before, immediately bounced back and showed they're still the 49ers. So I'm just curious how much of this whole analysis of Miami that isn't just, us talking, isn't just the sort of media, the shouty shows, but is Vegas as well, is completely constructed off that one game that was the last thing we saw.
Yeah. I mean, look, I still think Miami's good. And obviously, I think Tua's playing really well. I think he played better than the stats. There were some rough ones in there in the middle of the field, but the offense is still capable of being explosive. The defense now, they lose Bradley Chubb last week. They had their worst pass rushing outing as a team last week anyway.
Yeah.
And then they lose Bradley Chubb. So there are concerns on both sides of the ball, but they're a better team at home. They did beat Dallas at home, right? So I think it'll be a great game. That's why it's Sunday Night Football. The number 2 seed is on the line. I don't think Miami can drop below the 6 seed, perhaps. But this is for the AFC East. Buffalo can clinch so Buffalo wins, they get the number 2 seed. Buffalo can also clinch a playoff berth with a tie, or a Pittsburgh loss or tie, or a Jacksonville loss or tie, or a Texans-Colts tie. So if we get that Texans-Colts tie on Saturday night, Buffalo's like, all right, we're in. We made it. They're good.
Don't even need to show up.
I mean, you do, because you want that 2 seed.
Nah.
Do you want to play in Buffalo? I'm looking forward to the game, though.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say the last few weeks, Buffalo has done a nice job of showing that they can win in different ways and with the run game. And Josh Allen didn't play well at all last week against New England. I do think the passing conditions in Buffalo are a factor, but he didn't play well at all. But they still pulled it off because they forced a bunch of turnovers.
Yeah, they're a weird team, Buffalo. They've rescued their season, and I think they are a team in this AFC that can beat anybody in the playoffs. But I don't know if they've shown that they can do it for a run that they would need to make a Super Bowl or to win a Super Bowl. But they're certainly a team, if they do make the playoffs, that I don't think anyone is going to be happy about playing in the postseason.
No, they. That's why they have the the higher Super Bowl odds.
Also, all for seeing if Josh Allen breaks out more rugby plays. Crazy laterals out of the tackle.
Oh, high-end Josh Allen is amazing when he's feeling it. Looks like Daquan Jones is back. Is that right? For Buffalo? Am I looking at the wrong game? Did he come back last week? Did I miss that? It's good stuff. Ed All was making a lot of plays up front. Did Jones play last week? Yeah, he came back with 28 snaps. But he was playing really well early in the season. Had a 91 grade against Miami that first time around.
Yeah. So, I mean, losing him earlier in the year, he was on an absolute tear. It was a big loss as part of the sequence of losses they had on that defense that, you know, you can make a fairly reasonable argument that is, even if you're going to be able to withstand that, it's going to take a while for it to work out and figure out what the defense looks like without some really key players at each level.
That's what's, I think, been interesting about the Bills season. They had to deal with a loss of Matt Milano and Tre'Davious White. They had to deal with some of those losses. They bring in Rasul Douglas, and
who's been incredible for them.
And just like offensively, they moved on from Ken Dorsey, kind of reshaped the offense a little bit. So that's what happens in a 17-game season. You have to make those adjustments, but the Bills putting themselves in position to get the number 2 seed and make a playoff run here. Sounds like I'm going Buffalo. I didn't mean to be so negative toward the Dolphins. I'm just trying to lay out some facts here coming off that loss against the Ravens.
Yeah, I've also gone Buffalo, but I do think that there's a chance that we get something of a Miami backlash off the back of that game to, you know, remind people that they're still a pretty imposing offense.
Yeah, I'll take Buffalo, but I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be close, but I'll take the Bills to cover the 3, get the 2 seed, pushes Miami probably to the 6. So yeah, we could be looking at, like, one of these teams is probably going to play the Chiefs in Week 1 in Kansas City in the wild card weekend.
That's
a great
fun,
game, and I could come back and say I think either team can go in there and win.
Yeah, it's fun, whichever team it is.
So that's a great potential wild card matchup there. Is that it for the regular season?
I believe so.
That's it for us. Well, that was fun. We appreciate everybody. We appreciate everybody being here for the regular season. You guys are so good that we've been nominated for Best American Football Podcast. So we appreciate everybody being a part of this, helping us get nominated. Please go help us by voting. Link in the description so that we can all win it
We
together.
would very much like to win an award. Not
We'd
just be
love to
nominated.
win. We want to be award-winning.
We do.
Not just this award that we stole.
Yeah.
But like a real one that we can put up here. We will, you know.
I wonder if there's
display it
like a
proudly.
trophy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, it's a digital ceremony. Does that mean it's a digital trophy, or do we get hardware out of this?
It's probably a
It's in the mail.
whatchamacallit? What are the
An
digital?
NFT.
Yeah. NFT.
NFT trophy.
Is that how we give out our awards still?
I don't know.
Or did we can that?
Somebody else does
That's
that
so
now.
2021.
Yeah.
Nobody does that anymore.
That's another thing that's somebody else's responsibility these days.
We used to have a lot of responsibilities that you've passed off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, that's it. Week 18. Enjoy the football. We'll be back here again Monday morning reviewing all the Week 18 NFL action.